Welcome back. All right, so it is never too early in the season to talk about contenders as I did this morning. It is never too early in the season to talk about, well, who really needs that number one draft choice. So I went with the Sharks jersey and hat because reasons. But yeah, so I want to look at this. Four teams in the East that are 6 points or further out of the playoffs, and four teams in the West that are 6 points or further out of the playoffs as well. I felt like that was a good cutoff. And yet, the team at the top of the board, according to the odds, now I got the odds from moneypuck.com, they see Buffalo as a playoff team. So if you're a Sabres fan, maybe be mildly excited. So they're 12, 13, and 1, those Sabres, over their last 10 games. They're 5, 4, and 1. Now, I also wanted to put on the board the current records of AHL affiliates. So Rochester, the AHL affiliate for Buffalo forever, they're 11, 8, 1, and 1. So the record is still good, even though some of their star rookies from last year have graduated to the Buffalo Sabres, right? They're 6 points back of the playoffs, but their odds of making the playoffs, again, according to MoneyPuck.com, 66.3%. So they have a favorable schedule from here, and there's good chance that they get in the playoffs, apparently. Their drought, when it comes to whether or not they're in the playoffs, is 11 seasons. It's an NHL record. They don't want it to be 12. It's been half empty arenas so far this season in Buffalo. They went through that as well last year. And it's a fan base that desperately needs a playoff appearance more than anything. Their odds of getting Connor Bedard, according to Tankathon, so the odds of them drafting first based on the current standings, 5%. They'd have a 5% chance of drafting Bedard if they were holding the draft now. The lottery was now. There you go. Born 1999 and later. So looking at players born in the year 1999 and later, just to get an idea for which team on the board has really committed to a youth movement, which is very often a sign of a rebuild, right? You've got Dylan Cousins having an absolutely excellent season for Buffalo. Rasmus Dahlin, same thing. Dahlin, of course, drafted first overall. There were discussions of whether or not he was a bust early on. It just gets ridiculous, but he's not, and he's very good. Henry Jokiharju, a player they picked up from Chicago that I still think is, well, I like him more than other people seem to. Peyton Krebs, a good pickup from the Vegas Golden Knights, of course. JJ Peterka, who was one of those Rochester stars last year, along with Jack Quinn, both of them playing well for the Buffalo Sabres. Owen Power, an absolute revelation on the blue line. So you've got Power, you've got Dahlin, you've got Matthias Samuelsson as well. You've got three of your top six born in 1999 or later. You've got a very good young defense core. You've got some star power up front as well as on that defense core. And you have Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen as a goaltender who was born later as well. The Buffalo Sabres have a very good young team, which is how they're different from previous Sabres teams that failed to make the playoffs and had a lot of struggles in years prior. And then you've got Matthew Savoy and Noah Ostlund are two of the prospects. I wanted to put two from each team, so yes, I've left off some prominent guys. But just to give an idea for, who the next ones up are, Savoy's had a very good year. I don't know where he slots into the lineup when he's ready. I think Buffalo's going to have an embarrassment of riches up front soon enough. And so we either see veterans get moved out, or at some point, maybe they'll be one of those teams that can say, hey, we can move a prospect now because we're in contention and be buyers at the deadline. That'd be a very strange experience for Buffalo fans were that to come to pass. So I'm obviously leaning against the idea that Buffalo needs anything further. I think they're ready to start contending and having some fun out there. Then you get to Philadelphia, 9-13-5 in their last 10 games. They're 2-6-2. Lehigh Valley, so the Phantoms, 9-9-1-1. So of course the third column is overtime losses, fourth column is shootout losses. So middling record there. They're 8 points out of the playoffs. Their odds of making the playoffs are listed as 0.3%. So they're 2 points behind Buffalo, and they're 66% behind them in terms of odds making the playoffs. The playoff drought, 2 seasons for them. 2 years ago, they were pretty good. Their odds of drafting Bedard, if we had the draft lottery right now, 6.5%. Less young players in the lineup for Philly. You have Noah Cates, Joel Farabee. Farabee, very good young player. Cates has the potential as well. Morgan Frost, who we've seen him struggle at the NHL level. We'll see if he ever gets to the level expected. Ole Lixell, who came in out of nowhere, he's played some games for them this year. Owen Tippett, very solid addition for them from Florida, and there's still a lot of potential there. Igor Zamula, blue liner, and has been up and down. Obviously, there's upside for him. You have Cam York, who hasn't spent the amount of time in Philadelphia as expected. He hasn't spent any time on the Flyers roster, hasn't played a game yet, but that could change over the next little while here. And Cutter Gauthier, who is a very solid draft pick they picked up this past season. And so for Philly, I mean, I don't think they would be sad if they got Connor Bedard. This is a team that doesn't score goals. And this is a team that doesn't have very much in the way of the young guys coming up who can be that go-to guy. You know, you might have some good, solid young forwards, but having that go-to guy, that next big star player, Philadelphia would be really well served to get Connor Bedard. And if people are wondering, well, how's Bedard doing? Well, I've got him at the bottom of the board here in 28 games for Regina, who are 14, 12, 1, and 1. 28 games, 27 goals, 37 assists for 64 points. So the answer is he's doing well. More than 2 points per game is pretty good. It is in the WHL, but playing for a team in Regina that there were rumors that he might want to get out of, he's denied those rumors, and I think Regina's pretty happy that he wants to stick around. But he is definitely worthy of a tank. Speaking of, the Ottawa Senators weren't supposed to be in a tank this year, but they're 9 points back of the playoffs at 10-14 and 10-14 and 1. That should be 10-14 and 2, shouldn't it? That should be 10-14 and 2. Has to be. No. Discuss amongst yourselves. It's 10-14 and 2. Yeah, I wrote it down wrong. So the 10-14 and 2. I've got the amount of points there out of the playoffs, which is 9. I've got that right. So 10-14. There's always one error on every single board. Always. That's just that, and that's been the rule going back, I want to say 6 years. So over their last 10 games, Ottawa's 4-5 and 1. Belleville 10-11 and 1 and 0. So they're one game below AHL 500, I guess we can call it. Their odds of making the playoffs 21.6%. So they have the highest number on the board outside of Buffalo in terms of odds of making the playoffs. So it's not that bad, although 21% is not great either. It's been 5 seasons, the playoff drought for the Ottawa Senators. They do not want it to extend to 6. Absolutely not. Their odds of drafting first overall, 7.5%. Now, Ottawa would be happy with Connor Bedard. Not going to lie. It would be a silver lining if this team did, in fact, miss the playoffs yet again. But they've got so many good young players, especially on the blue line. So again, born 1999 or later, Jacob Bernard-Docker, Eric Brandstrom. Hard to believe he's still that young because it feels like he's been around for a while, but he is. Mark Kastelik as well. I think there's a little bit upside there with Kastelik, but you know what you're getting with him. Parker Kelly, I like Parker Kelly. Josh Norris, who of course has been injured. Shane Pinto, who's slowed down after a really hot start, but projects to be a very solid, probably third line center. Jake Sanderson, an excellent defenseman at both ends of the ice, and playing like a veteran right now. Tim Stützle, one of the go-to guys for them up front. Lassie Thompson, another good defenseman coming up. And Brady Tkachuk, who of course is the captain and born in 1999. So really, I think it's 1999 or 2000. But either way, Tkachuk, one of the younger captains in the National Hockey League. And this is a team that still has a couple guys coming up. Ridley Gregg, of course, there were those who expected him to make the roster this year. He did not. And Tyler Boucher, who was a surprise draft pick in the first round, but they still think highly of him. And yeah, Ridley Gregg is potentially another top 6 forward. I don't know how much this team would need Bedard. I know they would take him, but that would be considered a bit of a fail. And then it becomes, would DJ Smith be up there at the helm? Would Pierre Dorion? Would we see a change behind the bench or with general manager should the Ottawa Senators continue to fall out? I'll say I would be surprised if the coach didn't get fired. I would be very surprised if Dorion ends up out. I would think he would get another year to fix this, but one thing that might help him in Ottawa is the sale of the team. If the team's sale drags out a little bit, he may very well hold on to his job because you don't know who's going to be making those decisions, and you might want to wait until after the sale for that decision to get made. So yeah, we'll see what happens there. And apparently the NHL insisting on Ryan Reynolds being a part of it. Don't blame them. All right. So for the Columbus Blue Jackets, they're 8-15-2. They weren't supposed to be here either. So what's interesting is in the West, you've got 4 teams on the board that were kind of expected to be here. In the East, 2 out of the 4 weren't expected to be here. Buffalo and Philly, I would say, were kind of expected to be here. Ottawa and Columbus were supposed to be better. Columbus has been 3-6-1 in their last 10. They are 13 points outside of the playoffs. This has been a fail all around. However, Cleveland, the Monsters, are playing okay. They're 10-6-1-2 on the season. So their record's all right. The odds of them making the playoffs, 0.6%. So they've got twice as good of odds as the Philadelphia Flyers, who are 0.3%. Yay. 2 seasons out of the playoffs for Columbus. And again, when they added Johnny Gaudreau and they made the changes they did, the expectations were they'd get better. That has not happened. Their odds of drafting Connor Bedard, 11.5%. They are third in odds right now. And so that would definitely be a silver lining. But Columbus is a team with some good young talent too. There's Emil Bemstrom, who definitely benefited from play for Cleveland to start the season. Tim Burney, who was called up recently and's played. Adam Boqvist, who's out with injury right now. Yegor Chinakhov, who I still think is eventually going to be a 20, 25, maybe 30 goal scorer, but we'll see. He's had some bad luck around the net too. Jake Christensen, Trey Fix-Wolansky, hardworking forward there. Liam Foudy, who has been around for a while, but yeah, he's still young, and the potential is still there. David Jiricek, who's already come up and played for them. He was drafted this year, of course, and is seen as a future real anchor on that blue line for them. Kent Johnson, who has shown some star quality moves out there already this season. Not Lassie. I'm up here with Ottawa again. Smarten up, stupid hockey guy. Wrong team. Kirill Marchenko, who finally made his NHL debut this week and looked good. So he needed some time in the AHL. Now he's been called up. We'll see what these guys called up. What does Cleveland's record, right? Cole Sillinger, slow start for him. Still like Sillinger. Daniil Tarasov has shown that the future in net is bright, which is important because in the case of both Korpisalo and Merzlikins, they both had some shaky moments this year, right? So knowing that you're number 3 and Tarasov has a lot of potential and could be a very good goaltender, that's important. And then you've got, in terms of guys who haven't debuted yet, really with Columbus, a lot of their good young star players are already in the lineup. You've got Danton Mateychuk, I believe. And you've got Carson Kuhlmans. Kuhlmans, of course, drafted a couple years back. Highly thought of at the time and, could be a hit and miss. But for Columbus, who, of course, I see Cleveland on the board, so I want to say Cleveland. I do think they would welcome Bedard with open arms. Could be absolutely what this team needs. They need something. There's something with Columbus that has caused them to be a team that, at best, they've been middle of the pack. They've never really been a true contender in the National Hockey League. Do they have the team that you need to become a true contender? I would argue that if Bedard went to Columbus, that would certainly help them out quite a bit, right? But Columbus should go on at least some sort of a winning streak at some point, should hurt their chances at some point, but the odds of that seem to be fading as the year goes along. I just still think that they should go on some kind of a winning streak somewhere because I think they're better than their record indicates right now, but we'll see. And then we go out west. So with San Jose, they're 8-16-5 overall. They're 8 points out of the playoffs. Their last 10 games are 2-6-2. The San Jose Barracuda, so in the AHL, they're 12-9-0-1. They've got a better record than the Sharks. 8.9% chance of making the playoffs for San Jose. It's one of the better numbers on the board, but again, you're 8 points out of the playoffs. Your odds aren't going to be great. It's been 3 seasons since they made the playoffs. The odds of them drafting Connor Bedard, again, if the lottery was today, 9.5%. And there's not a lot of young players in this lineup. You have Nick Cicek, who came up due to injury and played. And then you've got Eetu Mäkiniemi, who's come up and played due to injury as well. And just basically got into because Kakinen was not playing very well. So there's a couple of young players there, but that's not that, franchise-changing player. William Eklund, Thomas Bordeleau, the two prospects I picked to put on the board. Eklund was expected to be in the lineup this year. It hasn't happened. Bordeleau, there was an outside chance. Didn't happen with him either. And so for San Jose, I do think this is the franchise that really needs Bedard. So if you're looking at which franchise really needs that star power, I would go with San Jose. I would say that San Jose desperately needs it. And part of it is because this team will not admit that they need a rebuild. It's very Vancouver reminiscent, where everybody's saying, okay, so you guys need to tear this down, and the franchise goes, no, we're going to try to get in the playoffs. We're going to keep adding guys. And so there's a lot of veterans in the lineup, thus the only two players that are on the board currently on the roster who were born in 1999 or later. Arizona, 7-13-4. They're 11 points out of the playoffs. Their odds of making the playoffs, 5.3%, which is higher than the other teams that have almost the same record as them. I would think this is because they have a bunch of home games, right? They've played a lot on the road. They're 1-6-3 in their last 10. Tucson, the Roadrunners, have not had a 14-game road trip. They're 10-7-2. So Tucson's record's good. 2 seasons since they last made the playoffs. Some of the teams that it's been 2 seasons since they last made the playoffs, you could put kind of an asterisk there because that was the expanded playoffs, and they likely wouldn't have got in if we'd played the full 82-game schedule and had the regular playoffs. But they have a 5.3% chance of getting in, the 8.5% chance of drafting Bedard. Again, if the draft lottery was held now, that 8.5% chance of winning it. But this is a team that does have some good young talent in the lineup and as well on the way. So you've got Dylan Guenther, who's been quite good for them. He's been released to go to the World Juniors. Barrett Hayton has struggled. It has been an absolute struggle for Hayton, and he's one of those reasons why I say it is smart for teams to get as many draft picks as possible. You get more prospects, and that way you're going to have busts, but you're also going to have finds as well. I look at Michelli as a find. Matthias Michelli's been very good. Jack McBain, solid in recent games as well. And J.J. Mosier, really good defenseman. So in Mosier and Michelli, you've already got two guys who are quite the find for the Arizona Coyotes. Logan Cooley and Connor Geekie, two of the forwards who are coming up for this team who are also projecting to be excellent. Logan Cooley, very well likely to be a star in the National Hockey League. In the event that Arizona does not get that number 1 draft pick, while there will be some who say, oh, Arizona's failed and they didn't get it, I think there's enough young talent here that Arizona's going to be pretty good. And they also have the cap space, so they can go out once they're ready to compete and they're like, okay, now we're going to take this serious and we're going to start winning some games. They have the money to go out and get a highly prized free agent or two. For Chicago, they're 7-14-4. Their last 10 games are 1-8-1. Rockford's got a solid record of 12-7-0-1. They're 11 points out of the playoffs, same amount of points as Arizona, but one more game played. Their odds of making the playoffs, 0.5%. So again, the schedule tougher for them than it is for Arizona. It's been 2 seasons since they made the playoffs as well. Their odds of drafting first, 13.5% currently. So Chicago, I know people wouldn't be all that happy if Bedard ended up being taken by Chicago, but have they earned the right to draft him? Well, I would say yes. I mean, they made the playoffs in 2020, but while they knocked out Edmonton in the play-in round, they would not have made it to the playoffs if we'd had 16 teams in and 15 teams out that year. So Mackenzie Entwistle, good, solid, good wheels on that kid. I don't know how much offensive upside's there, but good player. Philip Kurashev, bit of a surprise he's as young as he is. Alec Regula, defenseman for them. Lucas Reichel, haven't seen him lighting it up yet, but there's still the potential there. Ian Mitchell's been up and down. There's some debate about what upside's there. And Arvid Soderblom has been very good for them in net when he's played. And yeah, so I mean, their goaltending future's in good hands if they decide Soderblom's going to be the guy. And then their draft picks this year, they picked up Kevin Korchinski, who looked good during the preseason, and Frank Nazar. And so there's some good, solid prospects there. Their blue line looks solid. They did commit in the offseason to the rebuild. They picked up draft picks and prospects. Surprisingly traded Kirby Dach, and I'll mention that here because Dach's still a young forward that could have helped them out. DeBrinket's still relatively young as well, though he's not 1999 or later for his birth date. Believe that Dach is. But Chicago, again, while people would complain, great, now Chicago's going to get back to the top again. Almost as much as if Pittsburgh were to miss or Washington were to miss. Teams that have already had like a dynasty or have had that big franchise player, if they get the next big franchise player that's available, and that's the expectation with Bedard, there's going to be complaints. Absolutely. So yeah, Chicago, I do think that they're, I would say, in terms of teams that need Bedard, I would put them second behind San Jose. I really would. And I might have Columbus third, Philadelphia fourth, and Anaheim fifth. And Anaheim fifth because they've already got some really good young players and other ones on the way. They're 7-17-3. Last 10 games, they're 2-6-2. San Diego is 6-16. So San Diego, miserable record, the same as Anaheim. So that's not great. They're 12 points out of the playoffs. They have a 0.4% chance of making the playoffs. So oddly enough, they're further out of the playoffs than Philly, and they're given slightly better odds of making the playoffs. It's been 4 seasons since Anaheim made the playoffs, so about half a decade, and they're not making it this year either. Their odds of drafting first right now, 25.5%. And these, again, are using the odds from last year. Odds will change from season to season. They don't usually change by very much. So young players, they have some young players here. Max Comtois, another player who it feels like he's older than he is, just because of how long he's been in the league. Jamie Drysdale, who's currently injured. Brett Leeson, who they picked up on waivers from Washington. Isaac Lundestrom, good, the 20-goal potential's there. Mason McTavish, star player in the making. Pavel Regenda. Regenda came in out of nowhere, young player, hasn't looked out of place. Urho Vakanainen, of course, they picked him up from Boston. Boston had enough depth on the blue line to part with him last season. Trevor Zegras. Zegras is the star. He is the one of the future pillars of this team, really. If Anaheim's going to turn this around, Zegras is going to be part of that solution. And then you've got Pavel Mintyukov. Mintyukov, they drafted this year, of course, defenseman, and Jacob Perreault, forward, who was seen as maybe making the team this year. He didn't, but the potential for Perreault is there. Anaheim, I don't know that they necessarily need the Bedard pick. They have a lot of good young players already, but they won't turn him down, obviously. And that's the team that is the odds-on favorite right now. But the draft lottery, the odds-on favorite doesn't always win it. And we know that the team that finishes at the bottom, so if it's Anaheim, well, the draft lottery now is just the 2 picks, so the worst they could do is third, which might mean Michkov, might mean Fantilli. Both of those players are very good as well, and future stars in the NHL in all likelihood. So, let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Which team would you most like to see on this board get the number 1 draft pick? Which team would you least like to see get the number 1 draft pick on this board? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.